we did was in response to that was कि हम लोगों ने 10 दिन में एक financial disbursement का platform बनाया that can now send money to your NIC across Pakistan. So it's completely wallet agnostic. चाहे आपके पास Jazz Cash है, Easy पैसा है, Omni है, Ufone का है, and it doesn't matter कि आपके पास wallet भी नहीं है, आपके NIC में पैसे आ जाएंगे. So what you can do is you can go to any one करियाने की दुकान में in your गली मोहल्ला anonymously आप अपना CNIC verify करते हो और आप cash उठा सकते हो. This was a testament to the strength of our team and their motivations क्योंकि ये स्टैंडर्ड अगर हम वक्तों में ये प्लेटफॉर्म बनाने जाते तो सारी अप्रूवल्स एंड रेगुलेटरी लाइसेंस लेने में ही 12 महीने लग जाते थे बट नाउ व्हाट वी हैव इज बेसिकली अ प्लेटफॉर्म दैट कैन सेंड मनी वेयरएवर यू वांट. तो इसको हमने ऑफर करना शुरू कर दिया एनजीओस को. सो वी स्टार्टेड टू स्पीक टू देम. वी सेड कि तुम्हारी अपनी वेरीफाइड लिस्टें होंगी, लोगों ने ज़कात भी देनी होती है रमजान में. वी सेड हियर्स आवर प्लेटफॉर्म फ्री ऑफ कॉस्ट, आपने जहां पैसे भेजने हैं अपनी लिस्ट को वेरीफाई करें, we'll send it on your behalf. Customer service and verification के लोग भी हम अपने पैसों पे लगाएंगे और वो दे देंगे. So that was one of our first अच्छी learnings. The other learning was, जो final learning थी, कि हमने PPE suits manufacture करके हस्पतालों को देना शुरू कर दिया था शुरू में. Like जो medical superintendents थे और हस्पतालों की administrative bodies थी, हमने उनको en masse भेजना शुरू किया. हमें उन्हीं हस्पतालों के डॉक्टरों से कंप्लेन आना शुरू हो गई, जूनियर डॉक्टर से, कि हमें कुछ नहीं मिलता. एंड देन व्हेन वंस वी स्टार्टेड टू वेरीफाई, वो वाकई में नहीं मिलता था. सो सूट्स भी होल्ड होना शुरू हो गए थे. तो फिर हमने क्या किया, वी बिल्ट आउट अनदर प्लेटफॉर्म जिसमें अगर आप डॉक्टर हो, आप आके अपना पीडीएन, अपना वो जो पीडीएम में बोल रहा हूँ बार बार, ये जो अपना डॉक्टर आईडी नंबर होता है वो एंटर करते हो. we'll call you and we'll verify you and then we'll send you a suit free of charge. सिर्फ उसमें हमें प्रूफ क्या चाहिए कि आपने वीडियो बना के रिसीट की शुक्रिया अदा कर देनी है और बताना है कि आपको सूट मिल गया. सो ऐसा करते हुए we're on track to have distributed free of cost 15,000 सूट. So this was only made possible because ये सारे ब्रांड्स मिलके इकट्ठे हुए और अब हम कल अनाउंस करने जा रहे हैं 5 million face mask initiative. So everyone's going to pitch in. लेकिन पहली दफा मैं देख रहा हूँ कि सबसे अच्छी बात है कि instead of working independently, सब मिलके एक साथ कर रहे हैं. So we'd love if you'd visit our website and just have a look at it and maybe spread the word.
Yeah, excellent, Babar. And I ask everyone to please have a look at the website. It's not only very well done, knowing Babar will not do a bad job at design, but also it's also has a lot of interesting data and information. And I'll now go to Athar and then Imran and then Faisal. Athar, you've been very active right now, in trying to connect all those parties in solving some of the very recent and problems about COVID-19. Ventilators ke case mein matchmaking, there's other technological interruptions happening, trying to helping them out. So from taking Babar's point that we need collaborations and people are not naturally trying to collaborate, what are some of the learnings you have so far in the past 1 month? What people are doing right and what people are doing wrong? And what are some of the insights for the young people who would like to contribute to the hackathon, who would like to build new technologies? Athar?
Okay. Thank you, Suleiman. So I've been involved in trying to put together the HEC initiative. HEC immediately after COVID-19, we started working on a rapid response, grants program for a series of, things. There was a research grant, there was a technology transfer grant, and an innovation support grant. So 3 different grants for 3 different stages of the development process. And also I was sort of, I would say, very slightly involved with the ventilator initiative as well, जो Pakistan Engineering Council में हो रहा है. Again, my involvement in that was initially very, मैं सिर्फ एक awareness creation के standpoint से बात कर रहा था. I wrote a Facebook post that went viral when I started talking about the shortage of ventilators that's going to be in the country. And then I discovered when I wrote that, people started coming back to me. I found out about people who were already working on an indigenous ventilator design. There were also other international efforts that were going on at that point. I think बहुत James Dyson started his own sort of ventilator initiative. I think Elon Musk announced something. Is दौरान में the government also got involved, and I think it's really important that government does get involved in these kinds of things, because in a lot of ways, as Babar said, some of these initiatives, when they happen, they have a chance of basically running into walls. Ventilators के साथ भी यही है. You can't obviously operationalize anything unless it has been approved by the Drug Regulatory Agency of Pakistan. And what we found out when we started working through the government channel, the Pakistan Engineering Council and the Ministry of Science and Technology, was that DRAP did not have any mechanism to approve any medical device in Pakistan. We realized through interactions with DRAP that usually what we used to do was we used to approve devices that were already approved by either FDA, the US regulator, or the MHRA, the UK regulator. And in this case, because we were targeting a ventilator that was very low cost, it was next to impossible to get that ventilator first approved by either the US FDA or the UK MHRA. So we actually, again, because of the nature of the circumstances, I think we applied a lot of pressure on DRAP to come up with their own, regulations for approving a low-cost ventilator, which they did. We adopted and modified the UK guidelines for a rapidly manufacturable ventilator design. But that's not enough. Obviously, it is one thing to say, okay, we're going to adhere to these guidelines. It's another thing to actually come up with tests and test rigs to be able to verify that these guidelines have been met. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen that has happened over the last several weeks. And, and now I think 3-4 of these designs are currently being tested by DRAP and being clinically tried at various hospitals across the country. So, in a way, this is also a story of various actors coming together to do things that probably we would not have done, under normal circumstances. But it also points to a long way to go. HEC के context में, again, we've looked at the proposals that we've received, and we still find that there's a huge gap between where our academics are and what the needs of the crisis are. And I think it's going to be a struggle to get anything sort of done in time, to be useful. One other thing that Suleiman and I had discussed that I think might be of very is of importance and might be of relevance to the planned hackathon is this, the data gap. So इस वक्त आपके पास जो data है वो वही है जो government release कर रही है, which sometimes is poor quality, sometimes it is withheld because of whatever reasons the government has to withhold data. We are getting some data from all kinds of places, but it's not really coming together in a way that it could create some intelligence about the epidemic in Pakistan. So for example, Google ने कुछ data release किया था on travel patterns. I think telcos have a lot of data that could be very useful. I think there could be some independent data surveillance systems and mechanisms that could be rapidly put into place that could enable us to start triangulating things. So एक चीज जो अभी इस वक्त तक बहुत missing है हमारे इस COVID scene पे, and I don't think we've seen the end of it. I think we've been very lucky that so far it has not become a very full-blown epidemic in Pakistan, but this is going to happen. Maybe in a month or 2 months' time, we will be in the middle of a full-blown epidemic. And at that point, it will be really useful. And now if you start putting some of those data and models into place, it would be really useful to have a model that can help us predict infection rates, that could help us predict mortality, that could help us predict which places of the country we should close down and which places of the country we should keep open. So one of my interests is to try to see if we can use this data hackathon to build an epidemic model that could provide enough sort of policy advice and granularity for policymakers to be able to make decisions that need to be made. Is वक्त I don't think there is a model in Pakistan that exists. Models are being built all over the world. They're all to more or less degree faulty, but they're also providing a useful advice to policymakers. So, for example, the work that UCL did for building their model ended up influencing policies in the US and UK in a major way. Right? There are models that are being used in Sweden, which has taken the option not to close down and lock down the country, which is built on the work of a team of individuals. Led by a single epidemiologist, right? So these are important things, and I think our country doesn't have it. I think NIH and NDMA are trying to build something, but I think it is in this way where if we can use, some of this bottom-up energy to try to build something and populate this with some data, that I think we could really help both the government as well as the communities in trying to make policies and decisions as this COVID grows into a full-blown epidemic in Pakistan.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the general ideas, but also a very specific one. Before I go to Faisal, I think I'll go to Imran Zia, because your point is very relevant for Imran Zia, and that is that currently, Imran, I'd like to ask not only your role as a part of Executive Vice President with SERP, but also your general interest in data. What are the most important missing points in the data we have, right now? Because what is the importance of data in any decision making, and what these emerging startups, new startups, are not aware of? What are the limitations to design something without data? And secondly, a related question, which I would love you to answer together with this, is that because of your interest in developing technologies, that what are the basic technologies we must develop locally? So this will set up a frame for larger questions.
Okay, so I'm unmuted now, so you can hear me. So thank you, Salman, and I'll try to be brief because I'm being told that I'm actually on my mobile internet. My wired internet just broke, Murphy's Law, at the last minute. But anyway, so let's see how it goes. I might drop out, but I'll try to join back in. So building on what Athar was saying, I think I'll talk more about the work that I do at SERP, Center for Economic Research in Pakistan. And I totally second what Athar said. We also see, and SERP, obviously has done a lot of good work, and it has a certain amount of credibility with the government and all that. And we believe that we would have actually less problem getting access to data streams. But even in our case, we have to actually, push a lot to get the relevant data. And I think the data is important because I think it lets you build build a strategy that is customized to your environment. For example, it's very easy to talk about lack of testing, and we need to have 100,000 tests every day. So if you want to replicate the strategy that US is adopting, or some of the European countries are adopting, we just don't have the resources. So we have to have our own strategy, and based on that. But any strategy that you will have will need access to data. Things like what Athar talked about. If you want to have smart containment, for example, there's a lot of debate right now in Pakistan about should we have 100% lockdown, or should we actually allow economic activity? On one side, people can stop because they can't work and they can't earn a living because they are day wagers. Or you, on the other extreme, if you, but then your infection rate is going to be higher and your system could get overloaded. I mean, hospitals and quarantine centers and all of that. On the other hand, if you're totally locked down, then you have less of disease, but then you have other problems. So I'll share something with you. It was and even something as so there are 2 points I'll make. One is that it's very when you're thinking entrepreneurially, and a lot of people are watching this because they want to contribute towards new ventures and use data in interesting ways. You have to rely on whatever data is available, and you have to become scrappy, and that means you might have to scrape data from many different sources, which could be an interesting way to collect data. But more importantly, I think you need to be able to get out the usual mindset that an entrepreneur has, which is that, oh, I'm going to control my product or service end to end. You most probably will end up working with a lot of people. You'll have to rely on shared resources, and you can depending, I mean, you just saw what Babar just said, and Athar just said, it's lack of data. It's somebody has some data. Sometimes you'll need to use certain influence to get access to certain data. So you need to be in a mindset that you will need to work with a lot of different partners, to move your product or service forward. So that's one thing I would say. But going back to our work at SERP, and that's also along the same line. So we had public health experts, we had infectious disease people that we brought on board, epidemiologists, economists, policymakers, data science guys. And I'll share something with you which is very interesting that came out of that work. And if I can share my screen, host disabled screen sharing. So I guess you need to enable me to share my screen. So if you do that, I'll show you something that came out of, at the intersection of all these, different sets of expertise. And let me try again. Okay, still can't do it. But anyways, so the idea was that, just this notion that, should you shut down entirely, or should you, allow some economic activity? How would you do that? How would you balance that? So you can't have, either or. Okay, so now I can. So if you share, so this is what we came up with. So it's a graduated response, and the way you do it is that you proactively look for data, and based on that you classify your different cities or towns or whatever smallest unit that you can control, you can come up with from an administrative purposes. And obviously this is more for the government. And then you could say, are you at level 1, are you at level 2, level 3, level 4? Okay, and at each level it very clearly defines what are the actions that you need to take to be most prepared about going to the next level, which is you might see more disease, or if you don't see more disease, how do you keep yourself protected and still have some sort of an economic activity? So there's a whole so I can share this matrix with you. At each stage, what kind of testing you should be doing, what kind of tracking you should be doing, what kind of community messages you should be pushing, what kind of actions the district administration should be taking, what industries should be shut down, what industries should not be shut down. So instead of thinking, oh my God, we have 10 cases, what do we do? It gives you a plan as to how do you move from one stage to the next, instead, so that you don't go into panic, but you have a systematic way of addressing the various issues that you'll come up with when your community gets exposed to a different level of disease. So we call it, there's more about this at SERP's website, COVID-19 response. You go to our website, serp.org.pk, and you can have more of this information. So that's one thing that I wanted to talk about, and I think that again the key thing here is to be the ability to work with a lot of different people, and so the entrepreneurs need to think about it that way. The second thing, you asked me specifically about hardware and and some of the other things you should do. So two things. I think.
Here, Imran, also in the context that some of these startups would like to make those things, and they might want to be incubated at NIC, also keeping that in mind, just to clarify.
And I know a lot of your focus is on on software and data, but one of the things that we have learned from all of this is that the hardware is important. Face masks are important, PPEs are important, face shields are important. At the end of the day, we live in a physical world, and I think digital always gets overemphasized, but physical things also need to be made. So I think so let me give you an example, because I was it's sort of a funny example. So can people see this?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to spray, right? So you might even be able to see the spray. तो ये ऊपर जो टॉप के ऊपर लगा होता है ना, ये आपके ख्याल में पाकिस्तान में कितना इस्तेमाल होता होगा, कितनी बोतलें इस्तेमाल होती होंगी इस तरह की? जस्ट अ गैस, ये वाली बोतल जिसके ऊपर ये लगा हो, मेरे ख्याल में पूरे साल में कितनी इस्तेमाल होती होंगी? It's a question for the panelists. Anybody can guess. मेरा पर्सनली ख्याल है कि 10 से 15 लाख तो आराम से हम इस्तेमाल करते होंगे ये बोतलें पाकिस्तान में. That's my wild guess. ये ऊपर वाला ये मैकेनिज्म जो है ना, ये चाइना से आता है, ये पाकिस्तान में नहीं बनता. Can you imagine that? That's the level of industrialization we have in this country. And I'll share my screen with you because I work with an industrial designer. तो मैंने उनसे कहा कि आप इस तरह करें कि मुझे ना इसको डीकम्पोज कर दें ज़रा. उन्होंने जब डीकम्पोज किया ना उसको, तो ये सारी चीज़ें हैं जो इसके अंदर होती हैं. एक इसमें स्ट्रॉ की तरह की चीज़ होती है, 4-5 प्लास्टिक के टुकड़े हैं, एक इसके अंदर स्प्रिंग है. तो मुझे बताएं, ये आजकल की दुनिया में ये बनाना आपके ख्याल में कोई मुश्किल काम है? तो we need to think about as a country कि हम क्यों नहीं बना रहे, ठीक है? And I think that's important because you know, I was just reading an article about Japan, and Japan is giving $2 billion to its companies कि अपनी जो supply chain है वो आप जापान के अंदर लेके आएं as much as possible, because one of the things that people have learned is the importance of second sourcing and not being relying on just one country to get everything that you need. ताकि जब आपकी इस तरह की सिचुएशन होती है, आपकी सप्लाई चेन्स डिसरप्ट होती हैं, तो you should at least have the ability to build some of this stuff in your country. And I think that's very, very important, and that's a lesson that our entrepreneurs need to, you know, sort of take to their heart. So I think आपके पास NIC में एक वहाँ पे आपकी जो lab है, what do you call it, the, you know, where you have help me Sulaiman, maker space. So I think, you know, there's a lot of utility of that, and I think it should be even used more given where we are. And I think Athar ne wo ventilators ki baat ki, you know, we've been struggling with making a locally produced ventilator, so that is very important. And my final thought before I take a little bit of time, is that I think एक जो बहुत important area है which in our country we have not focused enough on is materials engineering. ठीक है ना भाई, वो कौन सी वो जो छोटी सी शील्ड होती है, जो छोटा सा टुकड़ा होता है जो आपने अपने मास्क के अंदर डालना है, जिसके अंदर से बैक्टीरिया या वायरस नहीं गुजर सकता, वो बनाते हैं क्या आप? ठीक है, जो materials engineering है ना, that's very, very important, and as a country we need to, you know, emphasize that, and a lot of our smart kids need to go and do materials engineering, because और material engineering की एक जो साइड चीज है वो ये है कि इट्स सेंसर्स. आजकल की दुनिया में चीज बनाना कोई मुश्किल काम नहीं है. रास्पबेरी पाई का बोर्ड लो, उसको 2 इनपुट दो, उसके अंदर एक एल्गोरिथम लिखो, उसको डेटा फीड करो, वो कुछ निकाल देगा, उससे कोई एक्चुएटर चला लो. यही सिस्टम होता है ना. एट द एंड ऑफ द डे देयर इज नथिंग मोर टू इट देन दैट. दैट्स, यू नो, एवरीथिंग इज डिजिटल कंप्यूटर. वो जो सेंसर है ना, whoever can make the most efficient and most cost-effective sensor wins the game. ये सारी सेंसर टेक्नोलॉजी है, ठीक है, और जो सेंसर है आपके मटेरियल से बनते हैं.
ये वही आप वाली बात. अब ये पूरा पीपी सूट है, ठीक है, मतलब इस पे हमने लोगो भी लगा दिया, लेकिन इसकी अंदर की सीलिंग वाली टेप होती है. देयर इज अ स्पेशल प्रोसेस टू डू इट, एंड देयर इज अ स्पेशल टेप टू डू. पूरे पाकिस्तान में नहीं बनाता कोई. So हम PP सूट मेयारी है हमारे पास, but we can't really ensure 100% sealing क्योंकि वो पाकिस्तान में है ही नहीं अभी, and it's a very small component.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Babar, for you know, highlighting what I just said. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, Sulaiman.
And this is a perfect, amazing, you know, जबरदस्त बात आपने की है. आई थिंक बाबर ने बहुत जबरदस्त लाइव दिखा दिया है कि आप पूरे का पूरा चीज बना लेते हैं, लेकिन इतनी सी चीज से आप रह जाते हैं पीछे. एंड वी हैव नॉट थॉट अबाउट दीस थिंग्स इन अ सिस्टमैटिक वे, ऑलमोस्ट नेवर. और अभी भी वो मसले ही आ रहे हैं. So Faisal, this is a perfect time to come to you for 2 reasons. First of all, we have talked about some general things. We have talked about some high-level approaches, some ideas that how can we help the community, how the collaborative process happens. But now we want to talk about more specific things. What are some of the things which are happening right now at NIC for COVID-19? And more importantly, what would you like to see in a startup which comes to you, which addresses this post-pandemic and you know, high-skill disruptions को जो address कर रहा हो? Faisal, please.
Thank you, Dr. Sulaiman. Following on the standing on the shoulders of giants, literally. So Babar, Athar, and Imran. So I think when you started out, when you made the introductions, you were talking about some focus areas for Open Data Pakistan, right, and for UX Pakistan also. And I heard education, I heard health, I heard food. So it's interesting that the last 2 years since we set up the NIC, our focus has been on 5 thematic areas, and those thematic areas, in kind of not in order of preference, but almost is education, health, food, energy, and climate change, right? So they all, in a way, come together. And COVID-19 is about a lot of that, right? So if you look at, how fast the pandemic spread, how quickly the virus has been mutating and its behavior has been changing in different environments, right? How different communities have responded to the threat that was being posed by COVID-19, and then how response started to get calibrated. So I can talk about Pakistan, and I'll talk about the entrepreneurial let's say landscape and how things started to happen. So a lot of times, in the last 2 years, the question used to be asked and say, oh, so what are startups, and what do startups really do, and what does entrepreneurship really mean? So the answer was always that, listen, entrepreneurship is about empathy. Entrepreneurship is about understanding a problem. Entrepreneurship is about feeling pain for somebody who's encountering a problem. And if you can possibly design a solution, then you are an entrepreneur because you can bring that solution to market. Speed at which you build that solution, the scale at which you can build that solution, and how effective that solution is. So we saw, right, from a standing start, literally a standing start. Zia has talked about, lack of manufacturing capacity, low understanding of material engineering, right? Baba just showed us a suit where one simple thing, like a tape which seals it, is not made in the country. I had a conversation yesterday with one of our entrepreneurs who's right now out there in the fields. He's helping with the wheat harvesting. So it's a company out of Deska, and they were manufacturing for the last 20, 25 years. They were making stuff. They were making washing machines. They were making small things for the home. But a couple of years back, they decided to pivot, and they decided to go into agriculture, and they started to make things. You don't have to invent anything. You actually really don't need to invent. At times, you need to indigenize, and you bring it to your local environment. You study what your local environment is, and you do that. So this young kid, right, studied that, and he decided that he's going to go into agriculture and making agriculture machines rather than the washing machines and all that his father and his grandfather had been making. And from there grew one little thing that's out there right now. 60 of those units have been sold. He's suddenly flooded with orders. He's got 300 orders, and he doesn't have the capacity to build those. But the interesting conversation I had with him is a Reaper binder. And the binding is done by a string, which is obviously a nylon string, a polymer-based string. And he said, can you imagine that is a business by itself, right? Worth billions of rupees. Because that string, again, there are 2 or 3 manufacturers only who can actually make that. And, so lots of opportunities have been kind of identified and thrown up by COVID-19 also. I think what we need to be talking now is not the aftermath, but what is going to happen to the world that we live in, right, as a consequence of COVID-19 also. Athar was talking about and saying, the worst may still yet be around the corner, right? We're not through it as yet. Zia talked about, the stages that one needs to be aware of, the data that you need to have to be able to address each stage, the response that needs to be calibrated from the entrepreneurial lens, right? So it's about being able to identify a problem, right, and the depth of that problem, and then designing a solution. And if you ever heard about lean and agile, this has been the period for lean and agile, right? Within 2 weeks, people had started to at least come up with designs of ventilators, right? There was the ambu-bag ventilator, then, it went on to a little more intricate design. And eventually, from what I gather, 3 designs have been approved by the Engineering Council, by the Pakistan Engineering Council. And now it's a question of whether we can manufacture them, how quickly we can manufacture them. Do we have all the engineering available to be able to manufacture them? Answer to a lot of these questions is yes. right? We've had a light engineering base that is already there. They were manufacturing auto parts. They can very quickly pivot to possibly manufacturing parts for ventilators also. Then from the entrepreneurial perspective, again, we've been hearing a lot about PPE suit. We've been hearing about face shield. We've been hearing about masks. We've been hearing about disinfectants, right? I got a message yesterday again from one of our entrepreneurs, and he's a chemical engineer. So he did what he could. In the sense, he put together a disinfectant, right, and created out of natural products, right. Got it tested by PCSIR. So he already has the testing that it is totally harmless. You can even spray it on food, right. It is so harmless, and at the same time it disinfects, right. So we've been hearing a lot of things about disinfectant gates being created, all kinds of things happening, and this is bottom up approach, right? What Athar alluded to in saying the bottom-up approach. Yes, the government has to have uh, create an environment. What we keep saying is the government needs to create a minimum viable environment, not a minimum viable product. We'll create the products. The entrepreneurs will create the products, right? And yes, we do need hardware products also. But everybody's talked about one thing, which is data. So we know that data is the key to everything. I mean, just as an example, so one of the simple things that one of the entrepreneurs did was the valves, right, for ventilators. Whether they get used or not get used is a different debate, right? But the very fact is that here was somebody from Australia who posted on Twitter, right, and said, I've created these valves and shipped them to Italy. And at that time, Italy was in the kind of peak of, the mortality also, and everything was happening there. So the entrepreneur I'm talking, he connected with him, right? The Dr. Alexander from Australia shared the design with him, the STL files, and he printed a few of those valves, got it tested at one or two hospitals, and then suddenly we had about 26 different people across the country with 3D printers. So we suddenly discovered that there were lots of people with 3D printers, right? So 3D printers now, you at least have some idea of what can be done and how fast it can be done, right? Obviously, one 3D printer is going to take a while to print anything, but if you have 100 3D printers, right, printing the same thing, that's going to happen. The kind of gadget that Imran Zia just showed us, the top of the bottle, right? Most of those components can be 3D printed and very easily, right? Putting it together would be another thing, but I'm sure anybody who can sit with a design and see it would be able to kind of break it down and say, okay, this is how we do it. And absolutely right. We need to indigenize. We need to bring a lot of this into the country, right? We've let our manufacturing base just fall aside, right? Yes, we are services oriented, which is in some ways maybe a plus factor because services will bounce back faster than anything else will, right? So suddenly, as soon as the lockdown is softened up, retail will start running again, deliveries will start running again. Schools will reopen. 31st of May, I think, is the cutoff time for that. The other thing that's obviously happening in this time, and it happened again in terms of education, right? So a lot of people suddenly realize that you can use a multiple number of ways to be able to transfer information, right? So even the government has stepped up, and you got a tele school or whatever, right? It's still not. We still don't have enough data to know how effective it is, how many people, how many kids are actually watching those programs, right? But yes, there is a beginning, right? So we need to look at all these beginnings, and data is a critical thing. Now, government can possibly do a lot more there. The biggest, what you call stores of data are actually with the mobile companies. The 4 mobile companies have massive amounts of data. So when we are talking about building a model, right, for the pandemic, and being able to share that information with epidemiologists and all, the mobile data that is gathered every day. I mean, an average mobile company is gathering billions of data points every day. Now, that's a huge amount of data. You don't have to have data on individuals. You protect privacy. You use the anonymized data, but you can use that data to build some really strong predictive models. Otherwise, like others said, there are lots of models being built everywhere, but a lot of them have still have problems and still have gaps. And we know that data models right, are voracious beasts. They need as much data as you can possibly feed them. The more you feed them, the more accuracy you get, the better model you create, right? So that is another part of it. We're looking at, talking to the current cohort we have. So there is a multiple companies, but the interesting thing is 9 of them were actually educational tech companies, right? And those ed tech companies are now, each one of them is kind of ramping up as fast as they can because there's an opportunity thrown up. That's the other part of it. Entrepreneurs actually recognize an opportunity faster than other people do. So, looking at it from that perspective.
Faisal, I'll come back to the other question at the end because I think I'll go to Faraz first. And then after this round, we'll have a last round of questions where we like to ask recommendations based on the feedback. But first, Faraz, to you. So Faraz, one of the things Babar talked about, which is like super amazing, that how from zero to millions he has reached, with the help of collaboration with some system in this while responding to this crisis. You have been looking at the scale in terms of your product and technology, and then how to go to the masses. So we would like to hear from you. So when these startups would be applying and will be thinking about the problem solving, one of the things they have to think about is this masses, is the scale, because the problem is too huge, and this is not about a niche problem which will be solved for a drawing room problem setting. They have to go to the masses. What are some of the things you have learned, and how would you help them to sort of work on this scaling issue while proposing ideas?
That question is for Faraz or me?
Faraz.
I think I'm okay. So my voice is on right now. Well, I mean, I was just complimenting Babar's creation, subsat.com. I was looking at the site. It's beautifully designed. It's so to the point. Either get help or give help. I can see that working for any crisis situation. So when we speak about scale and people and problem domain, I think it's there's so much chaos and there's so much unknown. There's so many unknown events happening right now that you have to be careful about where you focus and what sort of problems you're trying to solve. So it's easy to jump in and put out the fire with a bucket. But I think the way this conversation and everything that I've been hearing in this panel, there are meta problems that need to be solved. So I think there are two areas that people need to focus on. One is that when a crisis of this scale happens, how do you get people together? First of all, how do you get all this data? We're speaking about data. Getting the data is getting COVID specific data is a specific problem. But how do you get people together? How do you organize yourself in such a scenario? So I think there's opportunity here that can apply to times beyond COVID as well, because we have to look towards 2021, 2022, 23, when all of this will be behind us. You don't want to be working on solutions, investing in things that are not necessarily going to matter anymore. So focusing on getting yourself organized, and also focusing on looking at the common patterns in crisis management. So for example, right now, the people that need the most help, and again, Babar has done that once again, is when a crisis of this scale does occur in our society, we need to be able to reach out to those people who need the most help. So that's a common pattern. That's something that I think is useful even beyond the COVID situation. So that's my number one advice to anybody wanting to start up something. You have to look way ahead of COVID, and you also have to look at what COVID means. What's the bigger picture of COVID? What does it mean as a society for us? And what are the problems we're facing because of COVID? Fixing COVID is not necessarily everybody's cup of tea. It's highly sophisticated. We're all waiting for vaccine to come in. We're waiting for sophisticated medicine to reach the masses, and those are problems that most likely not qualified to solve at this time. But we are qualified to build tools, services, and that help mitigate the crisis as much as possible. And you can plug any crisis in place of COVID in there. There could be, wartime. There could be other diseases. There could be other global recessions, depressions. How do you solve those problems? And this is an opportunity for us to learn. And while we're learning, we help people out. So that's my view on this. I think being able to battle COVID itself requires phenomenal resources, know-how, and people on this panel have done some amazing things that I can't even dream of gathering such resources and driving such action. So definitely awesome work there. So we have to look at that, and other than that, we have to know that the digital space is operating full steam ahead. Products in our space and other people in e-commerce that I know of, they are operating at full speed now. In fact, they're seeing simple things like grocer apps, home delivery apps, and things that matter at a time where you can't physically move around. That's doing really well. So there's some very clear areas that are performing, and these areas also these areas are also meta areas. I feel that there was always a need for such delivery services to be efficient, to be there for everybody, regardless of whether there's a global crisis going on or not. So, and that's my main message. I think this panel is full of people who are, way ahead in the COVID specific matter itself. I think my advice from an e-commerce technology point of view would be to focus on areas that move ahead of this current timeline, which is very, very unpredictable for all of us.
Excellent point. So that's our first round, and we'll go to the next and final round, and we'll be very quick in that. But before that, I'll ask Sana to help us understand what are some of our main objectives of the hackathon is. What did we propose? What would be a good outcome? How do we define a good winner? And then I'd like to ask each panelist to reflect on that, maybe give us suggestions, and help us, improve the policy around this hackathon in a more specific way. Sana, please.
Sure. So the theme of the hackathon is fighting COVID-19 in Pakistan. It's an opportunity for all kinds of professionals and students alike to come together and build tech solutions. But now, after this conversation, I'm going to say also material solutions to drive social impact and to fight the novel coronavirus pandemic. I think it's a chance for all of us to prepare for the future. Since we all have been talking about this, we're entering a new era, or we've already entered a new era where the way we interact and the way we do things will be very different, from interaction to the way we work, from how businesses are conducted. So this hackathon is important in solving a very serious current real world issue. And our idea is to build an online space where we can ideate, design, experiment, and build tech and material solutions to help people in this serious crisis. We have 4 main themes: health, education, emergency response. They're interdisciplinary themes. And the last one is vulnerable population in terms of physical, economic, and social crisis. So for example, in economic, we mean large scale unemployment that we're going to foresee and ways to tackle such issues. So what we're looking for is more of precautionary preventative measures that prepare us for the future and solve long-term problems than just reactionary measures that are just a quick fix and just fix the current situation. Just some quick logistics. We're going to be doing this hackathon a lot on Zoom and Slack. We're going to have 3 main workshops on design, prototyping, and ideation. So we're looking for participants, and I'll share the link where everybody can sign up on opendata.com.pk under events. One important thing, we're also looking for volunteer mentors. So calling all directors, CEOs, managers, and anybody who wants to volunteer, mentor our participants through ideas and solutions, that would be great. Thank you.
So in the next and the final round, short and answers on what are your, so what should be the focus areas in your opinion right now, which new emerging teams and startups or organizations should work on, and what should be aware of based on your own experiences, and how should they sort of go about it, and what would be a good output in your opinion? For example, Babar, in your case, a good output. One could say a good output is a decent website, but in your case, I see the great output is that people are actually together. They're working together, and that has automatically given birth to a lot of interesting outputs. So, how would you define what is an interesting output for this hackathon? Is what would be a success of this hackathon if you're able to achieve A, B, or C, in your opinion, in a general answer?
देखें, I'll answer it in two ways. एक तो the essence of anything would be to get an MVP out and rolling. मतलब अब पहले क्या होता था कि हम लोग हफ्ते में sprints चलाते थे और चीज़ों को अपने products को वो कर रहे होते थे, but now you could do it in days, right? So whatever your level of competence is, अभी time सोचने का इतना नहीं है, ना planning करने का है. If you can roll it out and then figure out कि synergies क्या हो रही हैं. दूसरा, try to see कि existing systems को कैसे help कर सकते हो. For instance, we're making a pitch on Tuesday to about 200 more NGOs in Punjab जो कि खुद सब independently कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि किसी तरीके से उनके पास cash transfer mechanisms आ जाएं. So बजाय उसका करने के हमने मेहनत कर ली है, we'll just pass it on free of charge. लेकिन in terms of entrepreneurial effort, अगर क्या करना होता तो मैं सिर्फ अपने realm में बात कर सकता हूँ. I would look beyond COVID and try to focus on solving the problem of too much government intervention into data privacy, like into users also. I see a very real big brother kind of opportunity right now. तो अगर आपने कुछ करना ही है तो या तो आप बिल्कुल ही like 2G या 1G phones बनाना शुरू कर दो वापस. But anything that can maybe go beyond the problem and to also see it, लेकिन अपने area of competence में कर लें.
Excellent. I think this is a very, very important point for in emerging startups. Athar, your 2 cents, what would you like to see? You've been doing a lot of these grand challenges, but keeping in mind, for example, you also do this venture lab. So who would you like to incubate? What would be a good success out of this hackathon? Or maybe projects you would like to work on or like people to work on?
Well, I think one thing I would like to see is maybe a couple of good teams coming together to help build or populate an epidemiology model. There's a lot of data out there that is in disparate kind of places, and it's just the act of being smart and trying to bring this data together. I think that would be really useful, and once that happens, then we could start working with the government, because at the end of the day, the government also needs this data. मुझे लगता है कि I think those who are working selflessly in this time are doing better, and those who are still posturing for their corporate benefit or personal benefit are not getting along very well. अभी तक पाकिस्तान में कोई ट्रेसर ऐप नहीं हम बना सके कि हम ट्रेसिंग ही करना शुरू कर दें. और मुझे आज से 20-25 दिन पहले कुछ स्टूडेंट्स ने अप्रोच किया थ्रू यूनिवर्सिटी प्रोफेसर कि जी हम ये बनाना चाहते हैं, हम वो HEC की ग्रांट में अप्लाई करेंगे, तो आपका क्या ख्याल है इसके मुताबिक. मैंने कहा यार ये ऐप बनाने में कितनी देर लगती है, ये तो तुम बना के लॉन्च कर दो, उसके बाद HEC के पास आना कि हमने ऐप बना दिया, अब हमें इसको सर्कुलेट करने में मदद करें, राइट? तो द काइंड ऑफ एक्ट दैट्स really Babar did. So a lot of these things actually do not require a lot of work. I think we are thinking too much and we are posturing too much. and those who are actually doing stuff on the ground are actually getting ahead, and we all need to get out of this mode of कि जी इसमें हमारा कैसे फायदा होगा. ये वक्त हमारा फायदा सोचने का नहीं है. आज से 1.5 महीने के बाद आपके मुल्क में 10-15-20 हजार लोग मर चुके होंगे, which is which is 1/3 of your entire death toll during the 10-year-old war on terror, right? 2 months down the lane, you might have a death toll of 100,000 people, which is what happened during 10 years of the war on terror. So this is not the time to waste and posture. This is the time to actually do stuff. हम सब मैं काफी दिनों से ये बात कह रहा हूँ कि हम सब घर में बैठे हैं और वक्त जाया कर रहे हैं. हम में से मेजॉरिटी और हम सब लोगों को तनख्वाहें भी मिल रही हैं, तो हम इस टाइम में कोई काम कर गुजरे तो ज्यादा बेहतर है बजाय से कि हम ये बैठे सोचते रहें या वक्त जाया करते रहें. तो आई थिंक देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ टाइम, free time that is available with people right now. There's a lot of talent. I've seen a lot of efforts where people have started reorganizing themselves and started doing these face masks and shields and all kinds of stuff. But I think a lot of people are still sort of sitting on the sidelines and trying to figure out कि हम क्या करें, या इसमें हमारा फायदा कैसे होगा, या हम फ्यूचर के मुतालिक. ये फ्यूचर सब रह जाएगा जब 2-3 महीने में 1 लाख बंदा मरा पड़ा होगा ना, तो फिर I don't think we'll think about the future. We have to think about how we should be prepared for that future in 3 months, which is going to happen in 3 months. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth. मैं थोड़ा सा परेशान भी हूँ. एकेडमिक्स भी इसी किस्म की बातें करते हैं जब मैं उनसे बात करता हूँ कि जी अच्छा रिसर्च ग्रांट कब मिलेगी. यार रिसर्च ग्रांट का टाइम गुजर गया है, राइट? अब तो वो काम जो आपने कर लिया होता उसको हम आपको स्केल करने के पैसे दे सकते हैं. अब अगर आप रिसर्च करना शुरू करेंगे तो वो तो कोविड के बाद ही चीज बन के निकलेगी बाहर. सो मुझे लगता है ये है कि वी आर एंटरिंग इनटू वेरी डेंजरस टाइम्स. आई होप आई एम रॉन्ग, but during the Spanish flu of the 1918, about 2 million people died during the first year and a half in the first wave, and then 60-70 million people died in the second wave, right? So between now and the 18 months to 2 years time frame, we are looking at a massive death toll. और अभी तक मुझे नहीं समझ में आ रहा कि कोई किसी भी तरह से ये वायरस हमारे काबू में आ रहा है या हमसे सही तरह से डायग्नोज भी हो रहा है कि इसके इफेक्ट्स क्या हैं, how is it interacting with the human body. I think it's very very dangerous and very very complex. So please I would urge people to get out of their मेरा क्या फायदा है and get into the mode of how I can contribute.
Excellent point, Athar. Really, emotional also, and I think you're right because you also have access because you meet people and you get this kind of a scary data also. Please don't share with us. So I, Faraz ki taraf dekh raha hu, it's really tough times. We try to keep ourselves engaged in all these things, but I think this is a very tough time. And that's why we wanted to sort of have this hackathon, whatever we can do in our capacity to address this problem. And also have, इस panel का मकसद भी अतर यही था, to have people like you, and I'm very happy that Babar is on board, Imran and Faraz, to tell people that all of you are doing something and you started spontaneously, or आप चलते रहे और कारवा बनता गया. आई थिंक यही तरीका है कि स्टार्ट तो करें. लोग इतनी ज्यादा प्लानिंग में पड़े हुए हैं, लोग इतना ज्यादा सिस्टमैटिक चलते हैं, लोग इतना ज्यादा वो आइडिएशन फेज में है कि इसकी बारी नहीं आ रही कि हमने कुछ लॉन्च कैसे करना है. I think it's a very very important time to we go forward. Very quickly to you, Imran, what are the 2 or 3 most important things you would like yourself to do, but also other people to do under this hackathon and under this problem solving which we have launched under Open Data Pakistan?
So I'll build on top of what Athar said. I think in all of this gloom and doom, I think humanity will come out ahead. Inshallah, we might lose some people, unfortunately, but I think eventually we will solve this problem, and I think we need to work towards that. But I think what Athar said also is very relevant and brings up important reality questions. I think जो मैं चाहूँगा कि इस हैकाथॉन से निकले, आई थिंक एक जो चीज़ निकलनी चाहिए वो निकलनी चाहिए कि इट्स वेरी इजी टू टॉक अबाउट द फैक्ट कि जी बस आप कूद पड़ें और काम करना शुरू कर दें. लेकिन अगर आपने जैसे ये वेंटिलेटर्स के एग्जांपल देखे, आई एम श्योर अदर हैज मोर एक्सपीरियंस इन दैट, to do complex things, you need to be able to assemble teams of very diverse capability. So maybe any tools, platforms for collaboration where you can actually collaborate easily. I think, you know, अगर उसमें कुछ ideas हो, तो I think that will be very, very useful. Or especially, you know, when you're making physical things, you know, I mean, how could you, you know, bring all of this together and, you know, coordinate an effort? And I think, or I think कुछ जो आपको एक talent attract करना चाहिए इसमें वो ये है कि, you know, good product managers and project managers. You know, that, you know, it's just not about techies. It's also about people who organize the effort, and they are very, very important, and who will run these platforms and be active on that. तो एक तो मेरा ये specific होगा. Obviously, एक चीज जो मैं चाहूँगा अगर आप कर सकें इस fold में वो ये है कि, you know, maybe some policy recommendations can come out of it. You know, we can, you know, maybe, you know, at SERP we can, you know, potentially collaborate on that. Somebody should make an assessment of कि जी आपने जो 3D printers के ऊपर 3 साल पहले पाबंदी लगाई थी, उससे आपको benefit क्या हुआ है, और अब आपके पास क्योंकि नहीं है तो उसकी cost क्या है? How many lives you saved because say guns नहीं बनी, or yeah, how many lives will be lost because, you know, you don't have a, you know, 3D printer forms like Faisal mentioned. So I think those trade-offs need to be debated, and maybe some policy recommendations need to come from the government. I mean, that's another thing that I would like to see if that can come out of this. And my third thing is that I think there are some very interesting business models that can come out of it. And I think, you know, some of the companies that have a B2C model, I think need to flip that model to B2C. मैं आपको example देता हूँ. I mean, I'm advising some of these, you know, young men that you're also supporting at Risk, and we were, you know, brainstorming about their platform. तो वो कर क्या रहे हैं कि रिस्क जो है वो डब्बे बनाता है राशन के और वो बाइकिया को दे देता है कि जाके डिलीवर करो, ठीक है? तो how do you actually integrate business processes and service delivery processes across different organizations? कि जी मैं एक एंड कंज्यूमर नहीं हूँ जो जाके बाइकिया को बुलाएगा. I mean, give me a machine to machine interface कि मैं आपको उठा के कहूँ जी ये 100 ऑर्डर तैयार हो जाएं, ये बटन दबाएं और बाइकिया के पास वो चला जाए, और वो बाइकिया की सरदर्दी है कि वो schedule करे, मेरे से चीजें उठाए, डिलीवर करे और मुझे वापस रिपोर्ट बैक करे, but not in a manual way, in an organized machine to machine, you know, way. So I think there is वो data की हम बात करते हैं, but I guess process integration across enterprises and especially, you know, different service deliveries is another exciting opportunity that will also help, you know, during this crisis, but I think could come out, you know, could create some very interesting business models, you know, going forward also.
Excellent. No, I can't thank you enough, you know, for all these points. I think this will be a very good transcript for the people who would like to apply. Coming to you, Faisal, very quickly, what kind of a startup you would like to fast track in the next cohort? What are the properties and skills and the thematic areas they should be focusing on for you to decide कि इनको मैंने fast track करना है? High level.
Yeah, what I would like to see is some mechanism where we can, where data, right, becomes a critical part of it. Right? We've talked about, you know, Babar talked about hoarding and everything, right? Even you send PPE suits to a hospital and they get hoarded, right? You want to distribute food and there is hoarding going on there also. But I think the main thing I would say to anybody who wants to, who's part of this hackathon, and is intending to address any of those issues, whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's food, climate change, right? So looking at all that, do not be afraid, right? Do not be afraid that what you may have identified, you do not have the solution for it. Design your solution, right? So this is one of the things we've seen. What happened in these last 3-4 weeks, people are not afraid to design. They did not have time to have fear. So they just got up and they started doing it, right? That is a very, very important part of what we also talk about, and saying failure is a possibility, but don't let that paralyze you into overthinking and saying, will I be able to do it? Will I not be able to do it? So one of our startups, you know, yesterday he was talking to me, and he's now designing a rover. He's designing an inline inline sensible robot, right? That can actually deliver medicines in a hospital. So that's the other part of it. Please go and talk to the users. Please go and talk to people who are actually going to use that product, right? Whatever product you're thinking of designing, whatever solution you're thinking of offering, it's very necessary that you talk to the end user. What is it that they really want? It could be as simple as a plastic box with a couple of holes cut into it, so a doctor can intubate a patient safely without risk of infection, right? So at times it's as simple as that. It does not have to be a very complex solution. It can be a very simple solution. So looking at COVID and its aftermath, I think the important thing would be to be able to design products and services and solutions that can scale fast, right? That can come to market fast and that can actually be used by people who actually really, really need them. So that is an important aspect. If you ask me for one single product, right, it has to be something to do with this epidemic itself, and that is a database product.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for your input. Faraz, quickly, I think you have already mentioned some of these things to think beyond the problem. But before we wrap up, anything else you would like to add to the previous answer you have given?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is that I think an important area of focus is fake and false news. There's one of the things that has happened in this crisis is this insane amount of just misinformation. We're looking for real data, but the public is bombarded by false data. So there needs to be a solution to this huge problem, and I think that it's in fact it's a solvable problem, right? Where you can verify whether certain things are true or false. Somebody needs to come up with that idea, and I think that's an important area of focus. And the second point I'd make for the startups is that medical devices and other devices, even protective devices, you have to be extremely cautious. There's human life at stake here. And these things are typically way more complicated than they seem. I mean, you wouldn't want a protective device that doesn't really do its job. Now the person using it is feeling safe and it's just not working. Similarly, ventilators are extremely non-trivial technology. I've just randomly looked up a specification for one, and I was like, oh my God, how are they even going to begin to manufacture such a device over here without putting a patient's life at risk? Even if we're, there's talk of splitting ventilator tubes into two, it just doesn't work. It's not that simple. Both those patients need to have the exact same, biometric needs at that. So it's a very delicate process. So I would exercise a lot of caution. I'd work with real experts who are already manufacturing such things and go through that process, which normally takes a lot of time. So I know Faisal's a big fan of battlefield medicine. That's what he calls it. It's pretty cool. But at the same time, I think it should come with a lot of caution. And I'm not an expert in this area, but I do know that if startups are working on such things, they need access to experts and real authorities that can approve such designs. We should not roll these things out. It's another form of fake news, in my opinion. So that's my word of advice.
And for us, believe me, we can't have a better ending than this. Thinking about ethics, thinking about social responsibility, and thinking about what is the importance of human life. And I think what I like the most is that don't give this false hope that you're safe. So this is very important that people are aware, because believe me, I have this sanitizer with me, and for the first 2 days I was using the sanitizer, and then I gave it to my father, and he told me, "Yaar, 2 number hai." How do you know? And then he brought the other one from inside, and we compared, and for sure, wo 2 number tha. And you know what? I had a complete trust on the sanitizer. I was using it. I was going out, coming back, using sanitizer. Look at, and now उसका नुकसान ये हुआ है कि उस इंसिडेंट की वजह से मेरा यकीन ऑलमोस्ट हर सैनिटाइजर पर खत्म हो गया. For the next few months, any sanitizer I buy, I will say कि पता नहीं एक नंबर है या नहीं है. So I think this is very, very important. When you're not going to break the confidence of the customer, you're gonna break the whole ecosystem, और पूरी की पूरी economy खराब करने को तैयार है. अब लोग नहीं trust करेंगे. So I think this is a very, very important message you have given to all the startups. We need to pivot. We need to go very fast. We need to experiment. But please, the basic ethics, basic values should be there, without which we'll not be able to accomplish. So my concluding remarks would be, Thank you very much for coming up. We promise that we'll transcribe everything, whatever you have said. We'll convert that into guidelines. We'll make a document out of it. We'll share the document with you. You can give your quick input. You can add whatever you want to add. It'll not take a lot of your time, maybe 5 minutes, just to see this makes sense and this relates to your points you have made here. We'll improve our policy and procedures based on your recommendation, and we'll go in a much more effective manner based on your recommendations. This has been very, very helpful, and we wanted to take this approach by learning from you guys who have been in the battlefield, and we'll make sure that we learn from this practice, from your practice, and we have an improved policy and guidelines for Hackathon. Thank you very much for coming online. I know you're all very busy. It's Sunday, but again, much, much appreciated. Thank you, Faisal. Thank you, Athar. Thank you, Babar. Really appreciate Imran, Faraz, Sana. Please, Sana, start working on that, documenting with us. And I think as Imran's point on policy, I'm sure that you're going to love that point because that's your cup of tea. We'll work on that. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.